Escape from Tarkov is one of the most popular games on the internet right now. I wouldn't say that it's the most popular game, far from it, but when considering the broader scope of the gaming landscape, it's pretty damn high on the list. However, contrary to widespread belief, game popularity is not always a good thing. In many ways, it is, yes, but with a skyrocketing player count, there comes increased scrutiny, and that scrutiny is leading to an external conflict for Tarkov with a specific subset of gamers and activists. It all stems from Battlestate Games, the developers behind Escape from Tarkov, and their stance on female characters. The existing stance is that Battlestate Games will not include female playable characters, period. And this has led to a swell of protests and condemnations of the game by various media outlets, streamers, and industry professionals. To make one thing clear, I highly doubt this will impact the game's popularity or success. Real gamers, by and large, just don't care about this stuff. The people who care the most, at least, barring certain specific outliers, are media journalists and industry activists who really are not playing games for the enjoyment, they are playing for the politics. Escape from Tarkov is not facing a threat to its success, it is merely facing a threat to its image. And unfortunately, considering Battlestate Games' propensity for overreaction and improper response, the whole thing is a powder keg with a lit fuse. The genesis for this controversy begins with a simple interview. A developer by the name Pavel Dyatlov was asked a series of questions in which the subject of female combatants was covered, and his answers were somewhat incendiary. Keep in mind, I am not saying the word incendiary because of some personal belief. I'm saying incendiary because when you take into consideration the evolving and frantically outraged nature of modern gaming journalism and political activism in the space, it becomes clear that since the very minute those words were spoken, the fuse was lit. The question and answer segment went as follows. Question, did you consider having female characters playable? Answer, we considered that, but we came to the conclusion that women are not allowed to be in the war. Question, but these days women are in the military. Answer, I can agree with you and we discussed it for a very long time, but we came to the conclusion that women can't handle that amount of stress. There's only place for hardened men in this place. Now, keep in mind, this was an interview done in 2016. At that time, proportionally speaking, there was no outrage at all over the statements. However, jump forward in time to about a week ago, and the slowly burning fuse finally hit a pack of firecrackers. Articles began to surface on pretty much every major gaming publication about how Battlestate Games won't include women, Battlestate Games are sexist, and a deluge of additional coverage which honestly followed a pretty cookie-cutter template of Escape from Tarkov won't include women, and they are sexist for that decision, so you should hate them and not play. At this point, I want to switch topics a bit and discuss Battlestate Games itself as a development company. For starters, they are based in Russia, so in terms of geopolitical insulation from Western social justice outrage, they are virtually immune from a legislative perspective. Russia does not care what some US-based gaming activists think about a video game. However, even with that supposed insulation, the entire topic of inclusivity and representation in games really is a minefield, and it's only getting worse with time. As an example, consider the United Kingdom and an advertisement by a company called PC Specialist. The ad is innocuous and simple. It's three men of three different ethnicities playing video games or using a computer with some quick editing cuts. The primary demographic for this company by self-executed research and data analysis is male ages 15 to 35. And yet, because the three subjects were men and there were no women present in the 39-second advertisement, PC Specialist was forced to pull the ad for perpetuating harmful gender stereotypes. Nowhere in the video does the narrator say women cannot play games, cannot use computers, don't like computers, or anything of the kind. It is merely statements about editing, coding, gaming, and other computer-related activities. Even so, after less than 10 complaints were issued saying the ad perpetuated harmful gender stereotypes, the ad was forcibly pulled and is no longer permitted. That is the clown world we live in, merely showing three men of separate ethnicities, by the way, and failing to show women on screen despite not having anything else at all indicating a real connection to gender. On top of the fact that the audience for this product is overwhelmingly male, the ad was deemed offensive and subjected to regulation. Now, that's the UK, and the US, the UK, and Russia have completely different political landscapes, but the point is to illustrate that these issues are a progressive trend, not just a flash in the pan. A few years ago, when Battlestate Games developer Pavel Dyatlov made his original statements, no one cared. Now, the media cares, and they care a lot. Switching back to Battlestate Games itself, I actually don't like their methodology. I'm not here to blindly defend them, let me get that out of the way. I actually believe on a personal level that they have some glaring inadequacies in their leadership process and need to drastically rethink their approach to a number of separate issues. An easy example would be the previous situation with Eroctic, a YouTuber, where Battlestate Games did not like his critical coverage of Tarkov, so they used the DMCA copyright system to obliterate over 40 of his videos. The claim was that he spread misinformation, but even if that were to be true, they went so far as to personally admit that this alleged misinformation was only present in 1 or 2 videos, meaning they leveraged over 40 copyright strikes against him for no reason at all, which is completely unacceptable. I do not support, condone, or agree with their approach to handling controversy, and it is important for me to make that clear. Furthermore, as Battlestate Games responded to the most recent influx of criticism regarding female representation, they resorted to the claim of development difficulty being the real culprit behind lack of inclusion. There is also a somewhat trackable defense of game lore being responsible, which would probably be a much better excuse to rely upon, but focusing on the claim of increased labor being responsible, it really doesn't hold up. I have numerous developer friends now that I've connected with over the years, and I've been assured by multiple of them that this just doesn't make sense. There is an increase in the work required, yes, but it is inconsequential compared to what it takes to produce actual brand new playable content in the form of missions, maps, and gear. Not only that, but there are previous examples of similar claims which were also called into question. A few years ago, Assassin's Creed had a somewhat comparable situation in which the claim of female characters being too much work was thrown out as an excuse, only to be heavily disputed by other development figures. The lore for Assassin's Creed in that particular case made plenty of sense, so they really didn't even need that excuse. Women categorically should not have been in the game because players were all operating as different instances of Arno, the main character, who is male, so the foundation for demanding female inclusion was non-existent. However, even so, the claim of it being too much work did not hold up well regardless of whether or not it should have been used. I will champion the defense of creative freedom for developers in almost any and every circumstance. If Battlestate Games doesn't want women in the game, then there shouldn't be women in the game, period. But the defense of it being too much work, the body type differential being too severe, or the balancing being impossible as a result, I find it very hard to reasonably evaluate those excuses and see anything other than a surface level deflection. But why does any of this even matter? It matters because Battlestate Games has a propensity to react aggressively, impulsively, and improperly when confronted with criticism. Social justice fanatics who want to see advertisements banned because they perpetuate gender stereotypes often react in the very same way. The activists screaming about how they need to overthrow the oppressive video game patriarchy have only one mode, attack. And when they come up against a group like Battlestate Games, who pretty clearly just doesn't want women in this game, which is fine, then they lose their minds. The whole thing is a powder keg because even when considering comments made 3 or 4 years ago, the evolving landscape of outrage is so ravenous for conflict, they dug up these comments and created an issue out of thin air. An issue that is not breaking news by any stretch. They just progressively expand their sphere of anger until they find something to scream at. Battlestate Games is now put on the defensive, and who knows, the whole thing could simmer for another few years, I'm not sure, but you have an angry group of delusional fanatics looking for conflict, and a stubborn group of explosively reacting developers with diametrically opposed viewpoints on a hot topic modern political issue. That's not a recipe for de-escalation. Escape from Tarkov is a good game, because it's a game that scratches the competitive itch for a lot of different players. It has issues with hacking, I guess, it has issues with impulsive and immature responses from developers, but by and large, it is supremely successful because the gameplay is king. Gameplay does not care about facial modeling. They could simply record the dialogue lines and put a female face on the character. I'm sure there is technically more to it than that, I guess, but the option is there to pacify the outraged social warriors, and the gameplay would be relatively unaffected. However, Battlestate Games deliberately won't do that. They have taken a creative stance, which on a fundamental level I can sort of respect, the idea that the product they make is the way they want it, and the way they want it does not include women, but their critics are not the type of people to just put their head down and say, well, we tried, we lose, I guess it's time to move on. That is probably the polar opposite of what these people do, and as a result, the fuse is lit. It might not blow up again today or tomorrow, but the coexistence of hyper-feminist ideology and Escape from Tarkov is practically a mutually exclusive relationship. At the end of the day, I personally believe that Escape from Tarkov needs to take a clearer stance, outline why this particular unit reasonably has no women, highlight any real-world comparisons, such as the PMC Wagner Group being a real-world Russian paramilitary organization that does not have female combatants. The components to an airtight justification are there. Hell, how about the part where this game has one character model? Player customization literally isn't even in the equation. Even beards are objects that you loot in-game, and even with all that, when the justification is perfectly legitimate, they will still face outrage, but at least then it will dissipate quicker and fall harder. However, that's not what they are doing. The previous 2016 interview talked about emotional stress, and though there are proven physiological differences between men and women, that was never going to track well. Now they turn towards it being too much work, but again, probably not going to track well. So in my opinion, they need to buckle down on why the lore of this game has constructed a certain scenario, and then stick to that. Or just appease them and slap a female face on it. Who am I to say? And really, what does it matter? Because Tarkov will probably maintain its popularity regardless. That's it for today. I don't play Tarkov myself because of the previous DMCA system abuse. I drew a sort of line in the sand back when that happened, but it's a pretty unique game in this space, so there are definitely days where I regret that decision. Anyways, that's it for today. If you want support, there are links down below, Patreon, merch, Twitter, etc., but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.